Welcome to Catholic Grace Worldwide. I am Father Ayub, sharing daily reflections every single day to help inspire, uplift, and deepen your faith. Please watch, subscribe, and share these messages with your family and friends so we can spread God's grace together around the world. Welcome and God bless you. This reflection is for Thursday, August 27, the feast of Saint Monica. The church celebrates her memorial on August 27 immediately before the feast of her son Saint Augustine on August 28. The church recognizes Saint Monica as a model and patroness of Christian mothers. Because Monica lived in the early centuries of Christianity, she was not canonized through the later formal canonization process used by the church today. Her holiness was recognized through the ancient practice of Christian veneration, and her memory has been celebrated throughout the church for centuries. Her position today is therefore not simply historical. Saint Monica remains one of the church's most beloved witnesses for mothers, families, parents, grandparents, and everyone who carries another person in prayer. Reflection on 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verses 1 to 9. St. Paul begins by reminding the Christians of Corinth that they have been called to holiness and enriched by God's grace. This is important because St. Paul does not begin by asking whether they are perfect. He begins with God's grace. That is exactly where he should begin when we think about Saint Monica. Monica was not perfect. She lived in a difficult marriage. She had difficult children. She experienced disappointments. She watched St. Augustine make choices that caused her anguish. She knew what it meant to pray without immediately receiving the answer she wanted. Yet she never concluded that her son's history was finished. That is one of the deepest lessons of the first reading. God is faithful. Saint Paul says that God will keep his people firm to the end. Monica trusted perfectly in that faithfulness. Her confidence was not, Augustine will change because I can make him change. Her confidence was, God can reach my son even when I cannot. There is an enormous difference. Sometimes parents suffer because they believe they must control their children's lives. Monica teaches us another way. There comes a moment when love must move from control to trust. You can teach, you can advise, you can correct, you can encourage, you can warn, but eventually you must place the person into God's hands. Monica did exactly that. Her prayer became an act of surrender. She was not telling God what to do. She was entrusting Augustine to the God who loved Augustine even more than he did. That is authentic Christian prayer. Reflection on Matthew chapter 24, verses 42 to 51. Jesus says, Stay awake. And again, you also must be prepared. At first, these words may sound like a warning about the end of the world, but they are also a profound description of Christian discipleship. To stay awake means to remain spiritually attentive. It means not allowing our hearts to become indifferent. It means noticing when someone is hurting. It means recognizing when a child is drifting. It means praying when there seems to be no hope. It means continuing to serve when nobody notices. It means remaining faithful when the answer to prayer is delayed. Saint Monica stayed awake. She did not fall asleep spiritually while Saint Augustine wandered. She remained attentive to God. She remained attentive to her son, and she remained faithful. The gospel also speaks about the faithful servant who is found doing what the master entrusted to him. The servant does not know exactly when the master will return, but he knows what he is supposed to do. That is Monica. She did not know when Augustine would change. She did not know how God would reach him. She did not know whether she would live long enough to see the answer. But she knew what she was supposed to do: pray, love, wait, and trust. That is the spirituality of Saint Monica. Saint Monica and the power of mother's prayer. The world often measures greatness by visibility. We celebrate people who stand on stages, receive awards, lead organizations, write books, or accomplish impressive things. But God measures differently. A mother kneeling before her bed at night may be doing something more powerful than the world realizes. A father praying silently for his family may never appear in a newspaper. A grandmother lighting a candle for her grandchildren may never receive applause. A religious sister praying quietly in a chapel may never know whose life her prayer has touched. But heaven sees. Saint Monica reminds us that some of the greatest victories of grace begin where nobody is watching. She teaches mothers not to understand the spiritual power of their lives. A mother can carry her children not only in her arms but also in her heart. She can carry them to the altar. She can carry them into prayer. She can carry their names before the Eucharistic Lord. She can say, Lord, I cannot reach my child anymore, but you can. That prayer can become an act of a tremendous faith. And this is not only about mothers. It is for fathers, for grandfathers, grandparents, godparents, teachers, priests, religious sisters, and brothers. Anyone who has ever prayed for another person's conversion. There are people in every parish who have a St. Augustine in their life, someone they love who has wandered away from God. Saint Monica says to them, do not give up, not because every story will unfold exactly as we wish, but because no human life is beyond the reach of God's grace. Lessons from Saint Monica. Number one, do not confuse delay with denial. Monica prayed for years before she saw the fruit of her prayer. God's silence did not mean God's absence. Sometimes God is working underground, beneath the surface of a person's life. We see nothing, God sees everything. Number two, prayer must be joined to patience. Monica did not pray for Augustine one day and abandon him the other. Her prayer became a way of life. Christian prayer is not transaction with God. Lord, I prayed, now give me what I want. Prayer changes us while God works through us. Number three, love without surrender can become control. Monica loved St. Augustine deeply, but she eventually learned to place him into God's hands. True love does not possess, true love interests. Number four, a person's present condition is not necessarily the final chapter. St. Augustine was not always St. Augustine. The man who became one of the greatest teachers of Christianity once wandered deeply. His mother saw more than his mistakes. She saw the possibility of grace. There is a beautiful way for parents to look at their children. Number five, tears can become prayer. Saint Monica's tears were not signs of weakness. They were the tears of someone who loved deeply and trusted God profoundly. Some prayers are spoken with words, others are spoken through tears. God hears both. Number six, good example speaks when words fail. Monica did not convert Augustine by arguing with him. Her life itself becomes a witness. Her patience, fidelity, and prayer communicated something that argument alone could never communicate. Number seven, faithfulness matters even when nobody applauds. Monica profoundly never imagined that millions of Christians would one day know her name. She simply tried to be faithful to God in the circumstances of her son. That is enough. Holiness does not require fame, it requires fidelity. The message for mothers today. There are mothers today who are carrying burdens that nobody else knows. A mother worries about a child who has stopped practicing the faith. Another worries about a son or daughter struggling with addiction. Another watches her child make destructive decisions. Another worries because her family has become divided. Another carries the pain of a child who no longer speaks to her. Another has a child who has rejected God. Another has buried a child and continues to carry that empty space in her heart. To every such mother, Saint Monica speaks with extraordinary tenderness. Keep praying. Do not allow disappointment to destroy your faith. Do not allow your child's choices to convince you that God has abandoned your family. Do not allow today's darkness to persuade you that there can be no tomorrow. But Saint Monica also teaches us something deeper. Pray without trying to become God. We cannot control another person's heart. We cannot force conversion. We cannot manufacture faith. Only grace can transform the human heart. Our task is to remain faithful. Saint Monica and religious women. Saint Monica's witness also speaks beautifully to religious women. Every religious sister has, in some way, embraced a spiritual motherhood. She may not have biological children, but she carries people in prayer. She teaches, she accompanies them, she comforts, she serves, she intercedes, she stands beside people in their suffering. Many religious women have spent years praying for people whose names the world will never know. Their hidden prayer is a part of the church's spiritual life. Saint Monica reminds them that hidden faithfulness has eternal value. The church does not need only great public achievements. The church needs people who remain before God, people who pray when others sleep, people who believe when others doubt, people who remain faithful when there is no immediate result. That is the quiet power of spiritual motherhood. Stay awake and never stop praying. Dear brothers and sisters, today the church gives us Saint Monica, and tomorrow she gives us her son Saint Augustine. It is almost as though the church is telling us a story in two chapters. Today we see the mother who prays. Tomorrow we will see son who was transformed by grace. But behind St. Augustine's conversion stands a mother who refused to give up. The gospel says, stay awake. St. Monica's entire life could be summarized in those two words. She stayed awake. She stayed awake when St. Augustine wandered. She stayed awake when her prayers seemed unanswered. She stayed awake when her heart was broken. She stayed awake when she could not see what God was doing. And finally, she stayed awake until she saw the dawn of her son's conversion. Dear friends, perhaps someone here today needs to hear this message. Maybe you have been praying for someone for 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years. Maybe you have almost stopped believing that anything can change. Saint Monica tells us, do not give up on prayer. But remember, perseverance in prayer does not mean demanding that God follow our timetable. It means trusting God's wisdom even when the timetable is not ours. Monica prayed for St. Augustine, his conversion. God answered her prayer beyond what she could have imagined. St. Augustine did not merely return to ordinary Christian practice. He became a priest, bishop, theologian, pastor, and one of the greatest teachers in the history of the church. The woman who once cried over her wandering son becomes the mother of a saint and doctor of the church. What a mystery of grace. And perhaps that is why Saint Monica is so important today. She tells us that we should never write the final sentence of another person's story. Only God knows the final chapter. Our job is to love. Our job is to pray. Our job is to remain faithful. Our job is to stay awake. So today, let us bring before Saint Monica every mother who is worried about her children, every father who carries a hidden burden, every grandparent who prays for grandchildren, every religious sister who carries souls before God, every family divided by misunderstanding, every child who has wandered away from the faith, every person whose heart seems far from God. And let us ask Saint Monica to teach us her secret, how to love without giving up, how to pray without becoming discouraged, how to wait without losing hope, and how to trust God when we cannot see the answer. St. Augustine eventually discovered what St. Monica had believed all along. God is faithful. That is also the message of St. Paul today. God does not abandon the work of grace. And Jesus tells us, stay awake. So let us remain awake in faith. Let us remain faithful in prayer. Let us remain generous in love. And let us place those whom we love into the hands of God, who loves them even more than we do. Saint Monica died at Ostia in 387, but her prayer did not die with her. Her prayer continues every time a mother kneels for her child. It continues every time a father whispers a child's name before God. It continues every time a grandmother prays the rosary for her family. It continues even every time a religious sister intercedes for someone who may never know what she prayed for them. And perhaps one day in heaven, we will discover how many lives were quietly touched because someone refused to stop praying. Saint Monica, faithful mother and woman of tears and hope, pray for us. Pray for our families. Pray for our children. Pray for our young people. Pray for those who have wandered from the church. Pray for every mother who is carrying a hidden sorrow. And teach us to believe that no prayer offered with love is ever wasted. Amen. And question for meditation. Whom have I almost stopped praying for because I have become discouraged? And can I place that person into God's hands again today with the faith and perseverance of Saint Monica? God bless you.